The great crystal spires of Kethvar Prime stretched into the crimson sky like frozen lightning. Each tower pulsed with soft blue light, a sign of the power that flowed through the capital world of the most feared empire in the galaxy. For 50,000 years, the Kethvar had ruled without question. For 50,000 years, no species had dared to challenge their might. Commander Zethkol stood 12 feet tall, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial suns of the throne chamber. Like all of his kind, he was a perfect fusion of organic flesh and living crystal, created through millions of years of careful evolution and genetic perfection. His forearms moved with fluid grace as he reviewed the latest reports from the outer territories. "Speak," he commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber like breaking glass. The smaller Kethvar before him, a scout commander named Veltar, trembled slightly. Even among their own kind, the hierarchy was absolute. The strong commanded, the weak obeyed. It was the natural order of the universe. "Great Commander," Veltar began, his own crystalline form catching the light. "Our long-range scouts have detected a new system. Designation, Sol 3. The third planet shows signs of a developing species." Zethkol's multiple eyes, each one a perfect sapphire, focused on the holographic display that materialized between them. The planet was small, blue and green, orbiting a yellow star. Standard data scrolled past: gravity, atmosphere, composition. "Interesting," Zethkol mused. "Population? Approximately 7 billion, Great Commander. They call themselves humans." The throne chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of the crystal spires. 7 billion was a respectable number for a livestock species. The Kethvar had learned long ago that populated worlds provided the best resources, both in terms of raw materials and biological assets. "Technology level?" Zethkol asked. Veltar's form shifted, a sign of nervousness among their kind. "Primitive, Great Commander. They have achieved basic spaceflight, but barely. Some orbital structures, simple chemical rockets. They still use projectile weapons and explosive devices." Zethkol's laugh was like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. Projectile weapons. How quaint. The Kethvar had moved beyond such crude tools millions of years ago. Their energy weapons could slice through mountain ranges. Their shields could deflect the fury of stars themselves. Physical characteristics: small, Great Commander. Bipedal, average height of 6 feet. Weak bone structure, soft skin, no natural weapons. They appear to be omnivores, quite fragile by galactic standards. The Great Commander studied the images of these humans as they appeared on the display. They were indeed small pink and brown creatures with strange fur only on the tops of their heads. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and appeared to lack any natural defenses whatsoever. No claws, no fangs, no armor plating. They looked like the perfect livestock species. "Political structure?" Zethkol inquired. "Fragmented, Great Commander. Multiple competing governments, constant warfare among themselves. No unified leadership. They appear incapable of cooperation on a planetary scale." This was even better news. Divided species were always easier to conquer. The Kethvar had learned this lesson across 1,000 worlds. When a species fought among itself, it could never mount an effective defense against a superior force. Zethkol turned to face the great crystal throne at the center of the chamber. Upon it sat the Eternal Emperor, Kethamal the Undying, whose crystalline form had ruled for over 10,000 years. The Emperor's presence filled the chamber like a weight pressing down on reality itself. "Your thoughts, my Emperor?" Zethkol asked, bowing low. The Emperor's voice was like the sound of glaciers cracking, deep and ancient. "They sound adequate. Not warrior stock like the Velnari, but they breed quickly. 7 billion suggest good reproductive rates. They could serve well in the processing centers." The Kethvar Empire had perfected the science of species management over the millennia. Some races, like the fierce Velnari, made excellent soldiers once properly broken and trained. Others, like the intelligent but weak Zerathi, served as technical specialists and engineers. Most species, however, were simply processed for their biological components or used as basic labor. "Shall I dispatch a harvesting fleet, my Emperor?" Zethkol asked. "A small one," the Emperor replied. "No need to waste resources on such a primitive world. Send the 47th Fleet. 10 ships should be more than sufficient." Veltar bowed even lower. "My Emperor, there is one unusual aspect of this system. The planet they inhabit appears to be classified as a high-gravity, high-danger world by our standards. The gravity is nearly 3 times galactic standard. and the planet seems to experience extreme weather patterns, geological instability, and an unusually high concentration of apex predators. The Emperor's crystalline form shifted, showing mild interest. A death world? It would appear so, my Emperor. How such a weak species survived on such a hostile planet is unclear. Sethkol waved a dismissive hand. Luck most likely. Or perhaps they evolved in protected areas and only recently spread across the planet. It matters little. Weak is weak, the Emperor nodded slowly. Indeed. Proceed with the harvesting operation. But be cautious. Death worlds sometimes produce unexpected traits in their inhabitants. Have the fleet prepare for standard biological analysis before processing begins. As the audience concluded, Veltar made his way through the crystal corridors of the palace toward the military district. Around him, the capital city of the Kethvar stretched in perfect geometric patterns. Every building, every street, every plaza was designed according to the mathematical principles of perfection that guided their civilization. He passed groups of other species as he walked. Velnari warriors, their insectoid forms clicking as they marched in formation, their minds broken and rebuilt to serve the Empire. Serathi technicians, their pale, large-eyed forms hunched over complex devices, calculating hyperspace routes and maintaining the Empire's vast technological infrastructure. Dozens of other races, all serving their proper function in the great machine of Kethvar civilization. This was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, the weak served. The Kethvar were the strongest, therefore they ruled all. It was so simple, so logical, so perfect. At the military complex, Admiral Korthak was overseeing the preparation of the 47th Fleet. Like all high-ranking Kethvar military officers, Korthak was ancient by the standards of most species, over 3,000 years old, and his crystalline exoskeleton bore the scars and decorations of 1,000 campaigns. Veltar, the Admiral acknowledged, as the scout commander approached. I hear we have a new harvesting assignment. Yes, Admiral. A simple operation. Primitive species, fragmented government, no significant technology. The Emperor estimates 10 ships will be more than sufficient. Korthak nodded absently as he reviewed the fleet composition on his tactical display. The 47th Fleet consisted of 2 battle cruisers, 4 destroyers, 3 troop transports, and 1 processing ship. Each vessel was a masterwork of Kethvar engineering, their hulls embedded with the same living crystal that formed their exoskeletons, their weapons capable of sterilizing continents. Any special considerations? The Admiral asked. The planet is classified as a death world, but the inhabitants appear completely unsuited to their environment. Probably just survived through luck or by hiding in safe areas. Understood. We'll follow standard protocol. Establish orbital dominance, broadcast the standard ultimatum, then begin processing operations. How many do the Emperor's biologists want kept alive? Veltar consulted his data crystal. Standard ratios. Perhaps 10% for breeding stock and specialized functions, the rest for processing. This was how it always went. The Kethvar had perfected the art of conquest over 50 millennia. They would arrive at a world, demonstrate their overwhelming superiority, offer the inhabitants the choice between slavery and death, and then proceed with harvesting operations. Most species chose slavery. A few chose death. The end result was always the same. The fleet will be ready to depart within 2 standard cycles, Admiral Korthak reported. Transit time to the Sol system will be approximately 15 standard days. As Veltar left the military complex, he felt the satisfaction that came with a job well done. Another world would soon be brought into the Empire's embrace. Another species would learn their proper place in the galactic order. The humans would serve just like all the others. He paused at an observation deck and looked out at the busy traffic patterns around Kethvora Prime. Thousands of ships moved in perfect coordination, carrying resources from 100 worlds back to the capital, transporting Kethvar administrators and military personnel to maintain order across their vast empire. It was beautiful in its efficiency. Somewhere in the distance, barely visible even to his enhanced vision, a transport full of processed biological materials from a recent harvesting operation was descending toward one of the processing centers. The species that had provided that material had once thought themselves the masters of their world. Now they served a greater purpose as part of the Empire's resource base. Soon the humans would join them. Soon this Sol 3 would be just another dot on the vast map of Kethvar territory. Soon, these humans would understand what every other species in the galaxy had learned. that the Kethvar were the apex predators of the universe, and resistance was not just futile, but impossible. The crystal spires pulsed with their eternal light, and the Empire continued its perfect eternal order. 50,000 years of dominance and 50,000 more to come. The humans would be a footnote in that history, barely worth remembering once they had been properly integrated into the system. After all, what could 7 billion primitive creatures on a distant world possibly do against the might of the Kethvar Empire? The fleet would depart soon, and then they would have their answer. The warning came at 0347, universal time on a Tuesday that would forever change human history. Deep space monitoring stations scattered across the solar system detected them first. 10 massive objects, dropping out of hyperspace just beyond Pluto's orbit. The signatures were unlike anything in humanity's databases. No human ship could generate that kind of energy output, and the geometric patterns of the vessels were impossible to mistake for natural phenomena. Within minutes, every major government on Earth was in emergency session. At NORAD headquarters, General Patricia Hayes stared at the tactical display showing the alien fleet. Each ship was enormous, easily dwarfing humanity's largest space stations. The lead vessel alone was over 2 kilometers long, its crystalline hull gleaming with an inner light that their sensors couldn't fully explain. Speed of approach? She asked her chief analyst. Steady at 0.05 C, General. At current velocity, they'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 72 hours. Any communication attempts? Negative, ma'am. They're not responding to any of our hails on any frequency, but they're definitely scanning us. Energy sweeps across all our installations, satellites, everything. In Geneva, the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council was unlike anything in the organization's history. Representatives from every major nation sat around the table, their usual political differences forgotten in the face of this unprecedented crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary General Chen Wei-Ming began. We are facing first contact with an alien species. Our xenobiological teams are analyzing the limited data we have, but preliminary assessments suggest these vessels are far beyond our current technological capabilities. The Russian representative, Foreign Minister Volkov, leaned forward. What are their intentions? Are they hostile? Unknown, Chen replied. They haven't communicated, but their approach is methodical and deliberate. They're clearly studying us. President Elizabeth Morrison's voice came through the secure link from Washington. Our military advisors believe these ships could sterilize our planet without significant effort. We need to assume they're not here for a friendly chat. Similar conversations were happening in Beijing, Moscow, London, and every other capital on Earth. For the first time in human history, all of humanity faced the same external threat. Admiral Korthak stood on the command bridge of the battlecruiser, Eternal Dominance, watching the tactical display update with information about this Sol 3 system. His initial scans confirmed what the scouts had reported, a primitive species with basic technology scattered across a single world. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we've completed our analysis of their defensive capabilities. Report. Minimal, Admiral. They have approximately 200 nuclear weapons in orbit aboard various platforms, several thousand more on the planet's surface. Primitive kinetic weapons, some energy-based systems, but nothing that could penetrate our shields. Korthak nodded. It was exactly what he'd expected. These humans had barely managed to crawl out of their gravity well, and their weapons were the crude tools of a species still learning to harness basic physics. Communication status. They've been broadcasting at us constantly since our arrival, Admiral. Multiple languages, mathematical sequences, even music. They seem very eager to talk. How quaint, Korthak mused. Do they truly think we're here for conversation? The Admiral moved to the center of the bridge, his crystalline form catching the light from the tactical displays. Around him, his crew of Kethvar officers worked with the efficient precision their species was known for. This was routine, after all. They'd performed this same operation hundreds of times before. Open a channel, he commanded. All frequencies. Translate into their primary languages. The communications officer's hands moved across his crystal interface. Channel open. Admiral, Korthak's voice, when it came, was amplified across every radio, television, and communication device on Earth. His words were translated simultaneously into dozens of languages, though the cold, mechanical tone remained the same regardless of the language. Inhabitants of Sol 3, he began. You will address me as Admiral Korthak of the Kethvar Empire. Your world has been selected for harvesting operations. You have 72 of your hours to prepare for processing. In emergency command centers across Earth, humans listened in growing horror as the message continued. You are classified as a Class 7 biological resource with limited technological development. Under Imperial Protocol 847, you are granted the following options. Submit to Imperial authority and accept relocation to designated processing facilities, or resist and face immediate termination. General Hayes felt her blood run cold. Processing facilities. The clinical language couldn't hide what they were really talking about. Those selected for processing will serve the Empire in various capacities based on your biological and intellectual assessments. Compliance will result in the preservation of 10% of your population for breeding and specialized functions. Resistance will result in complete planetary sterilization. The message paused, and when it resumed, there was something almost bored in the alien's tone. This is standard Imperial procedure and is not subject to negotiation. You have 72 hours to organize your surrender. Prepare your population centers for orderly evacuation. Any attempt to flee your system will be met with immediate destruction. This message will not be repeated. The channel closed, leaving Earth in stunned silence. In the Situation Room beneath the White House, President Morrison looked around the table at her advisors. Secretary of Defense Williams was already pulling up military assessments, while Secretary of State Johnson was frantically working his phone, trying to coordinate with other world leaders. Options? Morrison asked simply. Militarily? General Cooper, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, shook his head. Based on preliminary analysis, these ships outclass anything we have by orders of magnitude. Their energy output alone suggests weapons that could crack continents. And 10 ships, ma'am. We couldn't stop one of them, let alone 10. What about evacuation? Getting people off-world? Impossible in 72 hours, Williams replied. We have maybe 50,000 people on space stations and lunar bases. Even if we could launch every rocket on Earth simultaneously, we couldn't evacuate more than a few 100,000. And they said they'd stop any ships trying to leave. The president looked at each face around the table. These were the most powerful people on Earth, and they were helpless. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Then another. Within minutes, messages were pouring in from every major world leader. Ma'am, Johnson said, looking up from his phone, I'm getting the same message from every capital. The answer is unanimous, Morrison nodded slowly. She'd expected as much. When faced with the extinction of the human species, old rivalries seemed pretty meaningless. Draft the response, she ordered. Send it on all channels, all languages. Make sure our new friends up there get the message loud and clear. 6 hours later, Admiral Korthak received Earth's response. He'd been expecting the usual pattern. Some governments would surrender immediately. Others would try to negotiate. A few might even attempt futile resistance. What he got instead was something he'd never encountered in 3,000 years of military service. The message was simple, broadcast simultaneously from every major government on Earth, delivered by their leaders in person. To Admiral Korthak and the Kethvar Empire, this is the unified response of the human species. We reject your ultimatum. We reject your authority. We reject your empire. If you want our world, you'll have to take it. But understand this, we will not go quietly. We will not submit. We will fight you with everything we have, and when that's gone, we'll fight you with our bare hands. You want to process us? Come and try. Korthak stared at the message display for a long moment. In the background, he could see footage from the human world. Massive crowds in every city, holding signs and banners with defiant slogans. Military forces mobilizing. Orbital stations powering up their weapons. Sir? His communications officer asked. How should we respond? We don't, Korthak said finally. Prepare the fleet for combat operations. All vessels to battle stations. He couldn't help but feel a slight sense of confusion. In his experience, species facing extinction chose survival, even if it meant slavery. These humans seemed to be choosing death over surrender. It was illogical, but it didn't matter. The Kethvar had dealt with defiant species before. It just meant the operation would be messier than usual. Back on Earth, humanity prepared for war. Old enemies became allies overnight. Military commanders who had spent their careers planning to fight each other now worked together to defend their species. Resources that had been jealously guarded were shared freely. Scientists who had competed for funding now collaborated on projects that might give humanity some slim hope of survival. In orbital shipyards around Earth and Luna, work proceeded around the clock. Every space-capable vessel was being retrofitted with weapons. Mining ships became missile platforms. Cargo haulers were packed with explosives and volunteers willing to fly them into enemy ships. It wasn't much. Humanity's entire space-based military consisted of perhaps 100 ships, most of them barely larger than the Kethvar shuttlecraft. But it was what they had, and they would use it. Dr. Sarah Chen, head of the Emergency Xenobiology Task Force, studied the limited data they'd gathered on the alien ships. Their hull composition appears to be some kind of living crystal, she reported to the Joint Military Command. It's incredibly dense, probably self-repairing. Our conventional weapons might not even scratch it. What about nuclear weapons? General Hayes asked. Possible if we can get them close enough, but their energy shields appear to be designed to deflect massive amounts of incoming energy. It would take multiple direct hits to even test their limits. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Humanity's most powerful weapons might be useless against these invaders. There is one thing, Dr. Chen continued. Their communication signals show some interesting patterns. Their technology seems to be partially organic, biomechanical in nature. That might give us some options if we can figure out how it works. General Hayes nodded. How long do we have? 66 hours until they reach Earth orbit. It wasn't much time. But then again, humanity had never been good at accepting impossible odds. They would fight because fighting was what humans did. They would resist because the alternative was extinction. Above Earth, 10 alien warships continued their steady approach, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Admiral Korthak reviewed the tactical data one more time. 7 billion primitives armed with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons against the might of the Kethvar Empire. It should have been a massacre. He had no idea that he was about to discover something that would shake the foundations of everything the Kethvar believed about themselves and their place in the universe. The humans were waiting. The first shots of the war were fired at 14:32 GMT. Exactly 72 hours after first contact, Admiral Korthak had positioned his fleet in high Earth orbit, expecting the usual pattern of quick surrender once the humans saw his ships up close. Instead, he found himself facing something unprecedented in Kethvar military history. Every human military asset in space was moving toward his position. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we count approximately 127 human vessels approaching on attack vectors. Composition varies. Military ships, converted civilian craft, and what appear to be cargo vessels packed with explosives. Korthak studied the tactical display with growing confusion. These humans had to know they were facing annihilation. Their largest warship was smaller than his shuttlecraft, yet they were attacking anyway. Their lead vessels are launching missiles, the tactical officer continued. Nuclear warheads, multiple incoming. Activate shields, Korthak ordered. Return fire. Disable their largest ships first. The battle was brief and decisive. Kethvar energy weapons sliced through human ships like knives through paper. Nuclear explosions bloomed harmlessly against crystalline shields. Within 30 minutes, nearly half the human fleet was destroyed. But something was wrong. Admiral, the communications officer called out, the humans are continuing to attack. They're not retreating. Korthak watched in fascination as the remaining human ships pressed their assault. Even as their companions died around them, they kept coming. One cargo hauler, its hull breached and trailing atmosphere, managed to ram itself into a Kethvar destroyer's shield at full speed. The explosion was magnificent and utterly pointless. Sir, we have a problem, his tactical officer reported. That last impact drained the Retribution's forward shields to 60%. Korthak's crystalline form shifted in surprise. 60%? From a primitive cargo vessel? Yes, sir. Their nuclear devices are more powerful than our initial estimates suggested, and their delivery methods are unconventional. As if to emphasize the point, another human ship exploded against the same destroyer's shields. This time, the readings dropped to 30%. How is this possible? Korthak demanded. Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. The humans had launched a second wave, not ships this time, but missiles. Hundreds of them, rising from launch sites across Earth's surface. Impact in 47 seconds, the tactical officer announced. Multiple nuclear warheads, varying yields. They're targeting all our ships simultaneously. Korithak felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. These humans were supposed to be primitive. Their weapons were supposed to be ineffective. Yet they were mounting a coordinated assault that was actually threatening his shields. The nuclear barrage arrived like an angry star. Dozens of warheads detonated simultaneously around each Kethvar ship, turning space into a hellscape of radiation and plasma. When the light faded, 3 of his vessels were reporting shield failures. Damage report, Korithak commanded. The Conquest and the Dominion have lost primary shields, came the reply. The retribution is down to 15%. All other vessels show significant shield degradation. How many missiles do they have? Sir, our analysis suggests several thousand more are being prepared for launch. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Korithak felt a flicker of concern. These humans were supposed to be livestock, not warriors, yet they were fighting with a ferocity and coordination he'd rarely seen even from warrior species. Launch ground assault operations, he ordered. Deploy landing forces to their major population centers. We'll break their will to fight by taking their cities. The Kethvar landing forces descended on Earth like falling stars. Massive transport vessels disgorged thousands of warriors onto the planet's surface. Each Kethvar soldier stood 12 feet tall, armed with energy weapons that could level buildings. Protected by personal shields that could turn aside tank shells, they expected to face scattered resistance from primitive humans armed with chemical weapons. Instead, they walked into hell. The humans had had 72 hours to prepare, and they'd used every minute. Every major city had been turned into a fortress. Buildings had been reinforced and connected by underground tunnels. Streets had been mined and booby-trapped. Civilians had been evacuated to prepared shelters while military forces took defensive positions. But most importantly, the humans had been learning. In the ruins of Moscow, Kethvar Tactical Unit 47 advanced through streets that should have been full of fleeing civilians. Instead, they found empty buildings and an eerie silence. Sector 7 is clear, Squad Leader Veltrix reported. No human contacts. Confirmed, came the reply. Continue sweep to Sector 8. The explosion that followed could be heard for miles. The humans had packed an entire city block with chemical explosives and detonated it, just as the Kethvar patrol moved through. The blast was so intense it temporarily overloaded their personal shields. 6 Kethvar warriors died in that explosion. It was the first time in 50,000 years that human weapons had killed members of the master race. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In New York, human forces lured Kethvar troops into the subway system and collapsed tunnels on them. In London, snipers armed with armor-piercing rounds targeted the joints in Kethvar crystalline armor. In Tokyo, suicide bombers drove vehicles packed with explosives directly into Kethvar formations. The humans were losing. Their casualties were massive compared to Kethvar losses. But they were learning, adapting, evolving their tactics with each engagement. And most disturbing of all, they were capturing Kethvar equipment. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the underground laboratory that had been hastily constructed beneath the ruins of Geneva. Around her, teams of scientists from every nation on Earth worked frantically to understand the alien technology that human forces had managed to recover from the battlefield. The energy weapon operates on principles we don't fully understand yet, she reported to the emergency military council via encrypted link, but we've managed to reverse engineer the power source. It's some kind of biomechanical crystal that converts matter directly to energy. Can we use it? General Hayes asked from her bunker in Colorado. We're trying. The problem is that their technology seems to be partially alive. It responds to Kethvar genetic signatures, but our biotech teams think they can fool it. On the screen, General Hayes looked exhausted. The war had been raging for only 6 days, but it felt like months. How long do you need? Give us 48 hours, Dr. Chen replied. Maybe less if we get lucky. What Dr. Chen didn't mention was the other discovery her teams had made. While studying captured Kethvar soldiers, they'd found something that changed everything they thought they knew about the galactic situation. The Kethvar weren't just conquerors. They were farmers. In the bioanalysis labs, forensic teams had found traces of hundreds of different alien genetic materials in Kethvar technology and biology. These creatures weren't just ruling an empire. They were literally consuming other species, incorporating their biological advantages into their own systems. The humans weren't facing simple conquerors. They were facing galactic-scale predators who had been perfecting the art of species consumption for 50 millennia. But the humans had also discovered something else, something that would prove far more important. Earth was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Admiral, the xenobiology officer on the flagship, reported, "I've completed the analysis of the captured human specimens." Korithak turned from his tactical displays. The ground war was not proceeding as planned. His forces controlled the major cities, but human resistance was intensifying rather than breaking. Worse, they were adapting their tactics faster than any species he'd ever encountered. Report. Sir, these humans are unusual. Their planet is indeed a death world, but far more extreme than our initial assessments indicated. The gravity is 3 times galactic standard, but that's just the beginning. The officer activated a holographic display showing Earth's ecosystem. This planet experiences regular mass extinction events. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, magnetic pole reversals. The species that survived had to be extraordinarily adaptable. Meaning, the humans aren't just adapted to their environment, Admiral. They're adapted to rapid environmental change. Their brains are structured to handle constant crisis situations. Their bodies are built for endurance under extreme stress. They're essentially living disaster response mechanisms. Korithak studied the biological data scrolling past. Human anatomy, human physiology, human neurology. None of it made sense from a galactic perspective. There's more, sir. Their planet contains predators that by galactic standards should be classified as apex killers. Yet humans not only survived alongside them, they drove most of them to extinction, not through superior weapons or technology, but through persistence hunting. Explain. They would track prey for days, sometimes weeks, never stopping, never giving up, until their target collapsed from exhaustion. Then they would kill it with simple tools. They didn't outfight their prey, Admiral. They out-endured it. The implications hit Korithak like a physical blow. Are you suggesting? Yes, sir. We're not fighting a normal species. We're fighting a planet-wide population of persistence predators who have been shaped by 50 million years of constant environmental disaster. They don't know how to give up because on their world, giving up meant extinction. As if summoned by their conversation, new alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. The tactical officer's voice was tight with disbelief. Admiral, we have a problem. The humans have launched a new wave of attacks, but these aren't using their old technology. Show me. The display filled with images that made Korithak's crystalline form darken with shock. Human ships were rising from Earth, but they were wrong somehow. The hulls gleamed with the telltale blue light of Kethvar energy systems, but they were configured in ways no Kethvar engineer would ever attempt. Sir, they've reverse-engineered our technology, but they're using it in ways our scientists say should be impossible. One of the human ships opened fire. The energy beam that lanced out was clearly based on Kethvar principles, but it was wrong. More focused, more intense, and somehow more aggressive than anything the Kethvar had ever built. The beam punched through the shields of the destroyer Retribution like they weren't even there. How? Korithak whispered. His xenobiology officer was studying the data with growing horror. Admiral, I don't think they reverse-engineered our technology. I think they improved it. Their approach to engineering is completely different from ours. Where we seek perfection and stability, they seem to optimize for adaptability and raw effectiveness. More human ships were rising now, each one different, each one wrong in its own way. They moved with an aggression that was alien to Kethvar sensibilities, closing distance rapidly, accepting damage that should have been crippling while returning fire with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Kethvar shields. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human leadership. Display it. The main screen filled with the image of a human female, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, but her eyes burning with something that Korithak was beginning to recognize as uniquely human. Admiral Korithak, she said, and her voice carried an edge that made crystalline forms shiver throughout the bridge. This is General Patricia Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. We wanted to thank you. Thank us? Korithak found himself saying. Oh yes, the human continued, and now she was smiling, showing her small white teeth. You've given us something we never had before. You've given us a reason to stop fighting each other and start working together. You've given us a common enemy. Do you have any idea what humans can accomplish when we're united? The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Around Earth, the Kethvar fleet began to reposition as more human ships rose to meet them. But these weren't the primitive vessels they'd faced before. These were something new, something that combined human ingenuity with Kethvar technology in ways that defied everything the Empire knew about physics and engineering. Admiral Korthak stared at his tactical display and felt something he'd never experienced in 3,000 years of military service. The cold touch of real fear. The humans weren't just fighting back anymore. They were learning. And if the biological analysis was correct, learning was what they did best. 3 months after first contact, Admiral Korthak stood in the ruins of his flagship's bridge and watched his empire burn. The tactical display showed the impossible. Human fleets were emerging from hyperspace across 17 different star systems, not the primitive vessels they'd started with, but sleek warships that merged human engineering with captured Kethvar technology in ways that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. How many ships? He asked, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. Conservative estimate places human fleet strength at over 800 vessels, Admiral, his tactical officer reported. His voice carried the hollow tone of someone reporting his own species' doom. They're hitting supply depots, communication relays, and isolated garrison fleets simultaneously. 800 ships. 3 months ago, the humans had barely possessed 100 space-capable vessels total. Now they commanded a fleet that rivaled the Kethvar's regional forces. But it wasn't just the numbers that terrified Korthak. It was how they fought. "Show me the Kepler station engagement," he ordered. The display shifted to show footage from a battle that had taken place just 6 hours ago. Kepler station had been a minor supply depot in the Tau Ceti system, defended by 2 Kethvar destroyers. The humans had arrived with a force of 12 ships and proceeded to demonstrate why the Kethvar Empire was facing extinction. The human vessels moved like no Kethvar ship ever would. Aggressive, unpredictable, accepting damage that should have been crippling while delivering attacks that defied conventional tactical doctrine. One human ship had actually rammed itself into a Kethvar destroyer's bridge at full speed, its hull packed with explosives. The resulting explosion had destroyed both ships, but the humans seemed to consider this an acceptable trade. "They fight like they don't care if they die," Korthak muttered. "Sir," his xenobiology officer said quietly, "according to our analysis, they don't. Human psychology is fundamentally different from ours. Where we value preservation and stability, they seem to value success over survival. They'll sacrifice anything, ships, lives, even entire fleets, if it achieves their objectives." The Admiral studied the data flowing past his screens. In 3 months, the humans had gone from primitive spaceflight to commanding the most aggressive military force the galaxy had seen in millennia. They'd reverse-engineered Kethvar technology, improved upon it, and mass-produced it at a rate that suggested their entire planet had been converted into one massive war machine. But that wasn't the worst part. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across the sector. Multiple species are reporting human contact." "Contact? They're not attacking, sir. They're talking." Korthak felt his crystalline form darken with dread. He'd suspected this might happen, but seeing it confirmed was still a shock. "Display the transmissions." The main screen filled with images that represented the collapse of everything the Kethvar Empire stood for. Human diplomats, actual diplomats, not conquerors, were meeting with representatives of species that had served the Empire for thousands of years. The Velnari and sectoid warriors, bred and broken over millennia to serve as Kethvar shock troops, were listening as humans explained concepts like freedom and self-determination. The pale, large-eyed Zerathi technicians were being shown human engineering principles that made their mandatory loyalty programming seem primitive by comparison. Most terrifying of all, they were listening. "How did the humans even find these species?" Korthak demanded. "Sir, we believe they've been monitoring our communications since the initial engagement at Earth. They've mapped our entire command structure, our supply lines, our garrison distributions. They know our empire better than some of our own commanders." The scope of human intelligence gathering was staggering. In 3 months, they'd not only fought a war against the Kethvar, but simultaneously conducted a comprehensive analysis of an empire that spanned thousands of star systems. It was as if they possessed some innate understanding of how to dismantle complex systems. "Admiral," his science officer interrupted, "I've completed the analysis of human strategic patterns. I think I understand what they're doing. Explain." "They're not trying to conquer us, sir. They're trying to delete us." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing systems. "Delete." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "Every action they've taken follows a clear pattern," the science officer continued. "They're not just attacking our military forces. They're systematically destroying our ability to maintain control. They've liberated 17 slave species, destroyed our primary shipyards, eliminated key command personnel, and disrupted our supply chains. They're not fighting a war of conquest, they're fighting a war of extinction." Korthak understood now. The humans hadn't just learned Kethvar technology, they'd learned Kethvar strategy, analyzed it, and turned it against them with terrifying efficiency. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth. It's marked as priority diplomatic communication." "From Earth?" "Put it through." The display showed a human female in military uniform, but her expression was calm, almost conversational. Behind her, Korthak could see what appeared to be a massive command center filled with humans working at stations displaying tactical data from across the galaxy. "Admiral Korthak," she said, and he recognized her voice from previous encounters. "I'm General Patricia Hayes, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Force. I wanted to discuss terms." "Terms?" Korthak found himself asking. "For your surrender." The bridge erupted in shocked silence. A human, a member of a species that 3 months ago had been classified as livestock, was demanding the surrender of the Kethvar Empire. "You're insane," Korthak said finally. "Am I?" General Hayes tilted her head slightly. "Let me share some current tactical assessments with you, Admiral. As of this moment, human forces control or have destroyed 73% of your outer system installations. 41 species that formerly served your empire have declared independence and are actively cooperating with human forces. Your supply lines are severed, your communication networks are compromised, and your remaining fleet strength has been reduced to approximately 30% of pre-war levels." Each statement hit Korthak like a physical blow because he knew they were all true. "More importantly," the human continued, "we've located Kethvar Prime." The blood in Korthak's crystalline veins turned to ice. The location of the Kethvar homeworld was the most closely guarded secret in the Empire. How could primitive humans have discovered it? "You're lying." General Hayes smiled, and Korthak was beginning to understand that human smiles were not always pleasant things. "We'll be arriving in your home system in approximately 72 hours. I thought you might want to evacuate non-combatants." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned horror. "Admiral," his tactical officer said weakly, "long-range sensors are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching from the direction of the Sol system." "Estimated fleet size?" "Sir, it's massive." "How massive?" "Over 1,000 ships, Admiral. And they're not stopping." Korthak closed his multiple eyes and tried to understand how this had happened. The Kethvar had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. They were the perfect species, the ultimate predators, the apex of biological and technological evolution. How had they been brought to the edge of extinction by creatures that 3 months ago had been using chemical rockets? His science officer provided the answer. "Admiral, I've been studying human evolutionary history. I believe I understand what we're facing." "Tell me." "Sir, the humans evolved on a planet where extinction-level events occurred regularly. Every few million years, something would happen that would kill off most life on their world. Asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, plague. Only species that could adapt rapidly to completely new conditions would survive." The officer's voice grew quiet, almost awed. "Sir, the humans aren't just adapted to war. They're adapted to the complete breakdown of existing systems. They're evolved to thrive in situations where all the old rules stop working. They're not fighting us like a normal species would fight. They're fighting us like a planetary extinction event." Korthak finally understood. The humans weren't trying to defeat the Kethvar Empire. They were trying to replace it entirely, to create something new from its ashes, and they were succeeding because they were evolutionarily designed to thrive in exactly these conditions. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from across the fleet. Ship commanders are asking permission to negotiate with human forces. Denied, Korthak said automatically, then paused. What was he denying? His empire was collapsing, his homeworld was under threat, and his species faced extinction. What was the point of prolonging this? Sir, his tactical officer called out, the human fleet has arrived in the outer system. Admiral, you need to see this. The display showed the approaching human armada, and Korthak felt his last hopes die. It wasn't just the size of the fleet, though, that was intimidating enough. It was the ships themselves. They had evolved. The vessels approaching Kethvar Prime bore no resemblance to the primitive craft that had first opposed his forces at Earth. These were sleek, aggressive-looking ships that seemed to merge the best of human and Kethvar design, while adding something uniquely terrifying. They moved like living things, with an organic fluidity that suggested they were as much grown as built. Admiral, his xenobiology officer whispered, I don't think those are ships. I think they're creatures. As if to confirm his fears, the human vessels began to change formation, flowing around the outer planets like a swarm of predators surrounding wounded prey. Their movements were too coordinated, too fluid to be simple machines. The humans hadn't just reverse-engineered Kethvar technology. They'd made it alive. Sir, incoming transmission from the human flagship. General Hayes appeared on the screen again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives of dozens of species, former slaves of the Empire who had joined the human cause. Admiral, she said, this is your final warning. Surrender now and we'll allow your people to evacuate to designated refugee zones. Continue to resist and we'll do to Kethvar Prime what we've done to your outer colonies. And what's that? Korthak asked, though he dreaded the answer. We'll make it so the Kethvar Empire never existed. The transmission ended and Korthak stared at the tactical display showing the human fleet surrounding his homeworld. 1,000 ships, each one a masterpiece of hybrid technology that shouldn't exist, commanded by a species that 3 months ago had been considered livestock. He thought about the 50,000 years of Kethvar dominance, the countless species they'd conquered and consumed, the perfect order they'd imposed on the galaxy. All of it was about to end because they'd made one simple mistake. They'd underestimated a species from a death world, and death worlds, he was beginning to understand, didn't produce livestock. They produced extinction events. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, shall I prepare the surrender transmission? Korthak looked around his ruined bridge one last time, then nodded slowly. The Kethvar Empire was dead. The only question now was whether the Kethvar species would survive what came next. Outside the viewports, human ships moved through space like living nightmares, and the galaxy prepared for a new age. 2 years after the fall of Kethvar Prime, Ambassador Zarel of the former Zarathi Technical Collective sat in what had once been the Imperial throne room, now converted into the Galactic Assembly Hall. Around him, representatives from over 200 species debated the formation of what the humans called the Terran Federation. It was a strange name, considering that humans made up less than 1% of the Federation's total population. But then again, everything about the post-human galaxy was strange. Zarel's large, dark eyes watched as human ambassador Sarah Chen addressed the assembly. She was small by galactic standards, barely 6 feet tall with the soft pink skin and fragile bone structure that had made humans seem like ideal livestock just 2 years ago. Yet when she spoke, the chamber fell silent with a respect that the Kethvar had never commanded, not even at the height of their power. The Federation Charter is simple, Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast crystal chamber. Any species that wishes to join does so as an equal partner. Any species that wishes to remain independent may do so, provided they don't threaten others. Any species that chooses the path of conquest will find itself extinct. The last sentence was delivered in the same pleasant tone as the first two, but every being in the chamber understood the message. The humans had proven their capability for extinction quite thoroughly. Cyril remembered the day Kethvar Prime died. Not destroyed, the humans were too clever for simple destruction. Instead, they'd use some kind of stellar engineering to alter the planet's star, making the world uninhabitable while leaving it perfectly intact. The crystal cities still stood, but they stood empty under a sun that no longer supported Kethvar biology. It was poetic justice, according to the humans. The Kethvar had made other worlds uninhabitable for their original inhabitants. Now they knew how it felt. Ambassador Zarel, Chen said, turning her attention to him. The Zarathi delegation has raised concerns about the Federation's military doctrine. Would you care to elaborate? Zarel rose slowly, his pale form trembling slightly. Even 2 years later, addressing humans directly still felt dangerous. They looked so harmless, but appearances could be deceiving. Honorable Ambassador, he began, my people are grateful for the freedom the Terran Federation has provided. We no longer serve as enslaved technicians for the Kethvar Empire. Our children learn science for the joy of discovery, rather than as forced labor. For this we are eternally grateful. Chen nodded patiently. She had learned that many species needed time to adjust to the concept of speaking freely. However, Zarel continued, we have concerns about the Federation's military capabilities. Our analysis suggests that human forces now exceed what the Kethvar Empire possessed at its height. Some among my people wonder, what assurances do we have that the Federation will not become another empire? A murmur ran through the assembly. It was a question many had wondered about, but few had dared to voice. The humans possessed technological capabilities that seemed almost magical, fleets that could appear anywhere in the galaxy within days, and a strategic coordination that suggested they understood the position of every ship, every planet, every resource in known space. More importantly, they'd proven they could make entire species disappear. Chen smiled, and Zarel was relieved to note it was one of their pleasant smiles rather than their predatory ones. Ambassador Zarel raises an important concern. Let me address it directly. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. It showed the current military disposition of human forces. Every ship, every base, every weapon system. As you can see, Chen said, current Federation military strength consists of approximately 15,000 active vessels, with production capabilities that could double that number within 6 months if needed. The numbers sent a chill through the assembly. At its height, the Kethvar Empire had commanded perhaps 8,000 ships. However, Chen continued, I want you to understand something fundamental about human military doctrine. We don't build these forces to conquer, we build them to prevent conquest. She changed the display to show a historical timeline. 2 years ago, this galaxy was ruled by a species that considered other beings as livestock. Billions of sentients lived their entire lives in slavery, bred like animals, processed like resources. That will never happen again. The display shifted again, showing recent deployments of Federation forces. In the past 6 months, human fleets have intervened in 14 situations, where one species was attempting to dominate another. In each case, we offered the aggressor the same choice we offered the Kethvar, stop or be stopped. And if they chose to continue? Asked Ambassador Theknor of the Velnari. Chen's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop. 3 species chose to continue. They are no longer a concern. The simple statement sent ripples of unease through the assembly. 3 species gone. Not conquered, not enslaved, simply erased from existence. I understand your fear, Chen continued. You look at our capabilities and wonder what happens if we decide you're a threat. The answer is simple, don't become a threat. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But I want to share something with you that might help you understand humans better. The display changed to show images of Earth, not the militarized fortress world it had become during the war, but the planet as it had existed before first contact. Cities full of diverse architecture, vast wilderness areas, oceans teeming with life. This is our home, Chen said simply. Before the Kethvar arrived, humanity was divided into nearly 200 separate nations. We fought constant wars over resources, territory, ideology. We were, by any objective measure, a fractured and aggressive species. The images shifted to show human conflicts, warfare, destruction, cities in ruins. The Kethvar thought this made us weak. They saw our divisions and assumed we were easy prey. What they didn't understand is that human conflict isn't about conquest. It's about testing ideas. We fight each other to determine which approaches to survival work best. New images appeared, humans working together, building, creating, exploring. When the Kethvar threatened our species with extinction, something remarkable happened. All those different nations, all those different ideologies, all those different approaches to survival, they unified instantly. Not because we were forced to, but because we recognized an existential threat to everything we'd learned about survival. Ambassador Zarel found himself leaning forward, fascinated despite his fear. Human psychology was unlike anything in the galactic databases. You see, Chen continued, humans don't fight for dominance. We fight for survival. And we've learned over millions of years that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about being the most adaptable. The display showed the rapid evolution of human technology during the war with the Kethvar. Ships transforming from primitive chemical rockets to organic biomechanical hybrids in a matter of months. The Kethvar tried to process us because they thought we were weak. What they discovered is that humans aren't weak. We're selective. We only use our full capabilities when we need to. And now? Asked Ambassador Vextal of the former Kethvar client species. Now we need to, Chen replied. Because we've learned something that terrifies us more than any individual threat. We've learned what happens when apex predators like the Kethvar are allowed to thrive. Billions die. Entire civilizations disappear. Knowledge is lost forever. She gestured to the assembled representatives. Every species in this room represents thousands of years of cultural evolution, scientific discovery, artistic achievement. The Kethvar would have processed all of you into biological components within a generation. Humanity finds that unacceptable. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't motivated by conquest or dominance. They were motivated by something far more dangerous. They genuinely cared about the survival of other species. The Federation exists for one purpose, Chen said, to ensure that what happened under the Kethvar Empire never happens again. Any species that wants to live freely may do so. Any species that wants to explore, create, discover, trade, will protect your right to do that. And if we choose not to join the Federation? Ambassador Ziril asked. Then you're free to remain independent, Chen replied. We'll still trade with you, still defend you if you're attacked, still share medical and technological advances. Federation membership isn't mandatory, it's optional. But the military protection isn't optional? Chen's smile turned predatory for just a moment. No, that's mandatory. Whether you like it or not, whether you join the Federation or not, humanity will not allow another species to be enslaved or processed. That's not negotiable. Ambassador Theknor of the Velnari, whose people had served as Kethvar shock troops for millennia, raised a tentative appendage. Ambassador Chen, my people we did terrible things in service to the Empire. We conquered worlds, enslaved populations. Why do the humans trust us? Chen's expression softened. Because we understand coercion, Ambassador. Your people didn't choose to become conquerors. You were bred and conditioned for it. The Kethvar took your natural warrior abilities and turned them into instruments of oppression. She activated another display, this one showing Velnari colonies that had been established in the past 2 years. Under the Federation, your people's warrior culture has found a new purpose. Velnari security forces protect trade routes, defend colony worlds, and serve as peacekeepers in disputed regions. You're still warriors. Now you fight to protect rather than to conquer. The assembly murmured with approval. It was a pattern they'd seen repeated across the galaxy. The humans taking the strengths of various species and finding constructive uses for them. I have one final point to make, Chen said, her voice growing serious. Some of you may be wondering about human expansion. Will we colonize your territories? Will we demand tribute or resources? She activated a final display showing human settlements. There were perhaps 50 worlds, all of them in previously uninhabited systems. Humans don't want your world, she said simply. We prefer to build our own. We don't want your resources. We've learned to create what we need from raw materials. We don't want your labor. We've automated most of our production. Then what do you want? Ambassador Ziril asked. Chen's smile was genuine this time, warm and strangely vulnerable. We want to know you're safe. We want to see what amazing things your species will create when you're free to pursue your own paths. We want to trade ideas and knowledge and culture. We want to explore the galaxy together and see what wonders we can discover. She paused, then added quietly, We want to never again receive a transmission like the one Admiral Korthak sent us 2 years ago. We want to live in a galaxy where no species has to choose between slavery and extinction. The chamber fell silent as representatives contemplated her words. It was a revolutionary concept, a powerful species that genuinely wanted other species to thrive rather than serve. The vote on the Federation Charter will be held tomorrow, Chen announced. But remember, joining is optional. Staying safe isn't. As the assembly dispersed, Ambassador Zarel found himself walking beside Ambassador Theknor. The two former enemies had become unlikely allies in the post-human galaxy. What do you think? Theknor asked quietly. Zarel considered the question carefully. I think we're living in a galaxy ruled by the strangest apex predators imaginable. Ones that hunt extinction events instead of prey. And that doesn't frighten you? Zarel looked up at the crystal spires that had once symbolized Kethvar dominance and now housed a democratic assembly of free species. It terrifies me, he admitted, but it also gives me hope. As they walked through the corridors that had once echoed with the commands of emperors and now rang with the debates of equals, both ambassadors pondered the same thought. Somewhere in this vast galaxy, there might be other species like the old Kethvar, apex predators who viewed other beings as resources to be harvested. But those species would have to contend with something the galaxy had never seen before. A race of persistence predators who had turned survival into an art form, and who considered the extinction of thinking beings to be unacceptable. The humans weren't the galaxy's new rulers. They were its new immune system. And extinction events, as the Kethvar had learned, had a very short lifespan once humans decided they needed to be eliminated.